Well, good morning. Let's talk about the Game Awards, shall we? The Game of the Year category has now just had its own debacle and its own situation on what's going on in the market. Well, first off, you've got this card game, Balala, or I don't even know what it is. I don't even care what it is, because it's a card game. It looks generic to me, but they nominate it for Game of the Year award, but then it's also in the Game of the Year indie category. Well, what's the point in the indie category if you're going to put a game into the Game of the Year category? You're already saying that this is the best indie game that's out there by putting it into that category. Kind of defeats the purpose of a Game of the Year for the category. Now, if something else takes it in the indie category, you have to sit there and go, well, how does this even work? Why is it even being nominated for Game of the Year then? And then you have other things like Stellar Blade getting the snub over this indie game. Well, Stellar Blade, from my understanding, from everything I saw, was an amazing game, and it sounds like it's slated to come out on PC in 2025. So that'll be very interesting when it does finally reach the rest of the masses, reaches away from the PlayStation and does something more for the video game. This is the thing. If you're doing exclusive video games for a console, you don't do anything to drive your sales up for those consoles anymore, because the consoles just get scalped anyway and they get picked up. Who knows how many PlayStations are actually out there in the world being used? Half of them are probably sitting in a warehouse saying they're sold, and when they're not. This is a neat little trick that for market manipulation. And then there is a DLC. I don't even know what the DLC, but I've read that there's a DLC being nominated for Game of the Year. DLC should not be on a Game of the Year list. They're not a complete game. They're a partial game. They're an add-on to a game. A DLC is not something that should be on the list. Now, do sequels belong on the list? It depends. Like if you look at Resident Evil 1 versus Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 2 was by far a much better version of the game, but Resident Evil 1 still had its charm and still had its cult or the B cult rating of a video game, and still has its own uniqueness to it. Now, that said, last year we also had remakes on there like Resident Evil 4. Remakes should never be on a Game of the Year list. It shouldn't turn around and be like, okay, we remade this game. We're retelling the same story. We're retelling the same thing that happened here. We just updated the graphics to something that looks great. Unless it does something that is completely out of the ordinary, like completely changes the way the game plays, completely does something more, then maybe, but even then, a remake should never be on the Game of the Year list. There's no reason why you should have a remake there. A sequel to a game, well, yeah, I get it. Sequels, look at Godfathers. Godfathers 2 was better than the first one. That type of thing, right? Sequels can do things, but they have to be very extraordinary, and it has to be something even more in that sense. But let's digress here for a second. When you have a indie game, an indie title, making the Game of the Year list, and then you have that category for the indie category, I think that means that there's something more that needs to happen here. I honestly think Game of the Year list should be made up of nominations or winners of other categories and then created as it progresses. I don't think it should be, okay, all these games get nominated for Game of the Year and then people vote on it. I think that's the problem here. It needs to be a different style of category. So it almost needs to be a bracket category at this point. So yeah, you have the best indie game. Okay, whatever wins the best indie game, that goes into the Game of the Year list. You have the best RPG, that goes into the Game of the Year list, and so on. That's how you create a proper Game of the Year list. First, you have to pass your own category of the game. You have to be the pinnacle of your style of game, and then you end up on the Game of the Year list. I think that would be a lot more fair than just sitting there saying these are the nominations for Game of the Year made by journalists and access media. That doesn't make anything good. It doesn't create a sense of well-being for the marketplace. It doesn't do something more in that sense. It just creates discontent and people getting very upset. Dragon Age Valgard, a lot of journalists are upset that didn't make it. Well, BioWare has become an absolute train wreck of a company. They fired their quality control people. They pretty much laid off half their staff in the middle of it. The game went through what, three revisions for a naming. Yeah, the game's got problems, and you can see it, and it's because the company behind it has problems. Because of that, it shows in their workmanship. It shows behind the lens. And that's why Velgard is not a game of the year category. That's why it's not going to be there and why it shouldn't be there. But of course, Wukong. Wukong got bought up instantly. It was a smash hit, a viral hit. The game, from my understanding, is not super hard like the Dark Souls, but it has that Dark Souls appeal. It has a lot more going for it. And honestly, from what I saw of it, I haven't been able to play it because I don't have time in the world to play a game that takes 100 hours. Um, it just it gets to that point where, yeah, the game should be on that list. Now, it got put on the list, and obviously people at like Kotaku got upset, misspelled the name, misspelled a bunch of things in their article because they just don't care about the game being on that list, and they don't want it there because it's a glaring thing in their face saying, yes, this type of game is what the market wants and the market's going to perpetuate it. And that's why. So when it comes down to a game of the year, the game awards, and all these fun things that are going on with the marketplace, um, a lot of these are ways for them to sell more sales of certain games, and it's maybe why they end up on these lists. Like the Baldur's Gate scenario that I went through last year, there was a lot of things that went down with that, and a lot of things I saw was market manipulation, and people obviously oversaw that, and they saw that my discontent for the game was hatred or something like that. Honestly, if you want to play a game and you want to be able to speed run so you can have sex in a game in about 2 minutes, all the power to you. All the power to you. Go ahead. Do what you will. Play the games you want to play. I don't give two craps. What I don't like is having to sit there and watch the market manipulation with people saying, "Oh, it sold 22 million sales or something like that," in a category of done by a third party that doesn't show the actual numbers. And it's market manipulation because, well, lo and behold, Hasbro's being sued over market manipulation for their Star Wars figures that they've put out there. I mean, they threw Magic the Gathering cards in a landfill, for Christ's sakes. And people want to sit there and rail on me over my discontent of Baldur's Gate 3. No, my discontent over the game is that the sales are faulty, that they are reporting to shareholders very poorly in a way to manipulate the market. And that's what a lot of these game awards are. That's what a lot, like you look at the Steam Awards, a lot of these are a way to trick the mind into thinking, oh, these games are a big hit. We get more sales by boosting it this way. Baldur's Gate 3, probably a very, very good game. I have no qualms with the game being out there. It's also a game that I don't want to play because I don't want to sit there and go through 17,000 different dialogues in a game. I'm sorry. To me, that just sounds like a tedious nightmare trying to go through a game. It sounds like I'm going to sit there and be bored out of my tree. You know, Final Fantasy is another one that's out there. If it's a compelling story like Final Fantasy 6 and Final Fantasy 7 was, I'm glued to it and I can continue to do that. It's like reading a good book. But when it comes to you pick your own adventure with the book that you flip through and you just want to skip to each page. That's how I see Baldur's Gate 3. I want to skip to the page that I want to play. And now it's like, okay, well, that's where it is. I have no problems with the game and no problem with people playing the game. It's just when you have market manipulation like that, like Hasbro has done for a lot of things, then that's where I sit there and go, listen, you got to kind of see where this is. It's tricking your mind into buying more of these things. And that's the way the market has been for video games and these game awards. Why these award shows are never really up to what they need to be. They sit there and they say, listen, we're going to tell you this game is good. We're going to tell you this movie is good. And because of that, you're going to go buy it and you're going to go spend more money on it. That's what this is all about. It's not about if a game is amazing. It's not about if a game sits there and hits the cream of the crop. It's because they just want you to buy more of the game. and spend more of your hard-earned money. Anyway, I digress. I am your proud Canadian Phoenix, Cindershadow. I'm signing off here. Have yourselves a great day. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you again very soon.